hey, this is your personality. You have a soul. You've got one life that you're aware of in this incarnation. What are the lessons that your soul wanted to learn? What story, what journey is it here to do? How can we line those two things up so you can actually live your fullest, richest life?
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing, and I'm just feeling at home. I feel like I'm around family. I'm feeling warm-hearted. I'm very grateful to welcome to the podcast today Amrit Sandhu. He is an incredible podcaster, conscious creator, and a mentor and an inspirer for many people around the world that use his coaching to help them find themselves. Welcome to the podcast, my dear friend.
Oh, San, I'm a big fan of what you're creating here in the world. And obviously you've been on your own journey for longer than a minute, but I was going to say a minute. So thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor and a pleasure to just share time and space with you here online. And thank you so much for having me.
Well, I mean, and that's it. Like, the oscillating chill you and I are having right now is that very now moment. And people are like, well, how do you even know that? Well, I teach people to see that stuff and feel it because that's what we do. It's all energetic potential. And I just feel at home just being around you, my friend. So again, thank you for accepting my invitation. And I want the audience to learn a little bit about you because you've got a great story and you're so welcoming, you're so nurturing, and you're so it's a very safe and happy place to be in when you're around. So that's something that from everything I've learned about you, you've always had that flame and you've nurtured it, and you've been through many things to help people know what it's like to experience the expansion and contracting of being human, you know? So how about you share a little bit?
Yeah, so I think what you're alluding to is the journeys. I've had two big dark nights of the soul, largely speaking, but actually I had an interesting conversation with a guest recently, and they were suggesting that actually they're coming in thicker and faster as consciousness at large continues to expand. And it was a bit of a relief to hear him say that because sometimes in these circles, I do feel like a lot of us feel like we're actually getting rinsed a bit harder than we normally have been. And then you speak to an astrologer and they're like, yeah, there used to be like one solar flare every 25 years. This year we've had 25. And it's like, what? There's a lot at play, a lot at large. But for me personally, the first big challenge that I had was living out of alignment with. Now I can articulate it super simply. It's like I was living out of alignment with my values. I had no idea about I struggled with depression for 6, maybe even a little bit longer years, and clinically diagnosed with major depression as a young adolescent, actually, which is a phase of your life where you're actually pretty invincible. I think young men and young women at that time of their life are just, you're pretty bulletproof. To end up opposite a psychologist's chair sitting in an office, a lot had to have gone wrong for me to end up in that situation, and it did. My whole world basically came crumbling around me, and I can articulate it now pretty well, but back then it was just a massive existential crisis. I was, asked to leave university. My friends didn't want to know me. My family was breaking down. It was just a lot of everything. Nothing really was working. And so I'm sitting opposite the psychologist and explaining everything. And it was actually pretty remarkable that particular moment, because there was a couple of things the psychologist said that have stayed with me for life in that very first interaction. One of them being actually, which was, she said, actually, you're going to be okay in a few months. And I remember her saying that to me and me kind of going, what what you just said, I've been struggling with something for about 6 years, and you said I'm going to be all right in like 3 months. And the reason I guess that was a bit shocking for me was like up until that point, I never really like had an exposure to mental health. Yeah, like it was never really a conversation. And everything's generally was like my reference point for mental health at that point was physical health. And so prior to that, like, maybe broke a leg, and if you break a leg, you break it in a moment, but it takes like weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to heal. Yeah. If you do something to your wrist, it's like like a split second thing, like it happens in a couple of moments. And then boom, it's taken like, again, a month to heal or something like that. So for me, mental health, it was like, you've been struggling with this for 6 years. And I was like, oh, so surely the road out of here is an 18-year journey, like the moment is 6 years long. Surely it's going to take, another 18, 20 years to figure it out because that's how it works. And she was like, actually, no, you'll be all right in a few months. And I was like, sounds like you're discounting all the challenges I've actually been through. I jest like now, but yeah, the key thing she said in there was two things. She said, "There's two reasons why I can say that to you, because I did inquire about it." And she said, "Firstly, you know something's wrong, and secondly, you want to do something about it, which is why you're here." And I remember her saying that, and I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Like I didn't really put a lot of weight in what she said. Subsequently, having been a coach myself now, like, having coached over 360 people deeply one-on-one in these intimate, in most cases, year-long journeys plus. It's been really, really, really interesting to just hear, like, it's so true because you can lead a horse to water sort of thing, right? But you can't force them to drink. And so her reflecting back that, hey, something's wrong is seismic for transformation, right? And then you actually want to do something about it is pretty much the other half of the equation. So in that moment, that was very, very illuminating. And then the key thing she helped me understand after just listening to my story for a little while was, you're out of alignment with honesty. And I was like, oh, okay. And she's like, yeah, and you can just install honesty. And that was pretty harrowing to hear someone just call you out like that, because you pulled at the thread of the of the rug right out, and it just like the rug just came out from underneath my feet. And I was just like, oh, wow, she just listened and she totally got to the heart of the matter. And for the longest while, I just thought, that's how everybody operated. Now, it's a big part of my life's work is helping people discover their values, like their authentic, true core values. And for me, what had happened at that point was I had grown up with like cultural values from a culture that, coming from an immigrant family, I had the operating system, let's just call it Mac OS, from India. Yeah. So they had the Indian operating system, and I was running in a Windows Western environment, right? And so I was here in Australia running like in a cultural value set that was more aligned to different set of values. And I was running a different set of values from a different culture. Now, like when I say this, it makes it sound like Indian values are not as good as like Australian values, and it's really not the case. Like everything's, So let's get into the weeds with that a little bit, and it'll give you an insight as to what I mean. So the key thing that was came out of it was like, hey, you need to adopt honesty. And I looked back and I was like, okay, so what does that really mean? So I was like, yeah, I'm not honest in all of my interactions, and it does lead to a lot of issues. And it was in the small things, right? Like you'd invite me over to dinner, and you'd say, hey, can you like dinner's at 6:30? You'd call me at 6:35, and I wasn't there yet, and I'd be like, I'll be there in 5 minutes. And you'd be like, oh, okay, cool, perfect. There's like 6, 7 other people at dinner. And then it'd be like 6:45, and you're like, hey, Amrit, where are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm just 5 minutes away. And you'd be like, oh, okay. It'd be like 7 o'clock, and you're still calling me like, Amrit, where are you? Like dinner's getting cold. Should we just start without you? It's like, no, I'll be there in 5 minutes. And I get there around 7:30. Yeah. So at this point now, like everybody's waited for an hour. Yeah. Dinner's cold. Like you guys totally could have eaten dinner. I could have joined you for dessert. I could have had dinner afterwards. But for me, what was happening was when my interaction with you, I was putting my best foot forward to try and placate and please you, people pleasing, right? And so I just tried to like avoid any type of like conflict that I would have run into with you. And so you look at like the Indian culture, and it's like, well, hospitality is like a big part of the Indian culture, right? Like we have a saying, "Guest is God." And then you look at like, well, my cousins as an example. Like well, a couple of my cousins, but one of my cousins drives like a beautiful BMW, brand new 7 Series, yeah. But he lives in a 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm looking at his car and I'm like, your car is significantly more lavish than your apartment is, in my humble opinion. And so, from coming from a Western value set, it's like, oh, this seems like it's a bit out of alignment. But when I speak to him, it's not out of alignment at all. He's like, hey, like I'm in business. So when I go and interact with people, it's very important that I put my best foot forward, because those little 1% shifts make all the difference in the world. And I'm not trying to mislead, but I'm just conscious of this is what it takes. And and he's growing up in an environment where there's 1.6 billion people, yeah, as opposed to growing up here in Australia, there's like 26 million people, yeah. Like I think it's 4 or 5 times the population of Australia lives in New Delhi in one city alone, or something ridiculous like that. So the amount of competition and the amount of, all of that sort of stuff, like, has such an impact on what the environment is like. And so I run the risk, and I've noticed this on a few podcasts when I listen back. It's like, oh, you make it sound like Indians don't have integrity, because you say, oh, the Indian value set doesn't have honesty in it. And it's so, like, if I was to ask an Indian about it, which I am Indian, so I don't know why I'm referring to myself in the second or third person, but the key thing in there is, my cousin said, "Let's like, hey, like, you can't call them out for being dishonest." It's like, yeah, India, like, we're known, like, yeah, sure, like, there's corruption. Yeah, people know that it's a developing country. People know there's corruption, and it's like, yeah, so isn't that dishonest? And they're like, yeah, but we're completely open about the fact that we're corrupt. Whereas you in the West, on the other hand, are corrupt, but you completely try to say that that's not happening. And so who's more dishonest? And you're like, whoa, right? So this is how, like, there's just different value sets in different cultures. There's different ways of going about what you're doing. Neither is wrong, neither is right. Yeah, it's just the environment, and there's a whole bunch of reasons as to why the economy, the environment, the people, the culture is running the way that it does. Now, the big thing that I learned from my journey was that if you don't discover your own values, set your own tone, if you will, other people will set your tone for you, right? Other people's values will hijack yours. If you don't have a strong enough vision for your own life, other people's vision for your life becomes your vision, right? But you still have a soul's calling that is very difficult to ignore. But if you haven't given it the time and space, like time of day and the space to breathe into your life, other people's stuff is going to inform where you head. And it's not like they're being insidious either. Once again, right? They're coming from the best place. Yeah, like your family is like, they want what's best for you from their worldview. They're not you, that's all, right? And so they'll want this, they'll want that. Like for me, it was like, hey, will you become like a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer? Yeah. My mum still hung up that I didn't become a doctor, right? After all these years. Yeah. And I'm like, but in some ways, like you look in and like I'm helping people live a really rich life through coaching, right? And podcasting. And so for me, I'm quite content. But that to sort of say, therein lies like my work, which is, hey, what is society trying to, like, society, culture, parents, family, they tend to hijack our values and inform us a certain way. Sometimes it's a little bit insidious because consumerism is a part of the capitalistic machine. Touch wood. So, you're easier to consume when you're not centered, and don't know what you want, and we can just tell you what you want and you'll go get that, right? But as opposed to getting very clear, hyper clear on who you are, and what your values are. And from that point, kind of going, this is who I am. And this is what matters to me, right? And so in order to understand that, I had to be really honest with myself, right? Back to the psychologist's office. It's like, hey, be honest with yourself. Who are you? What's going wrong? What's going on? All of this. And so that brought me to a whole journey. She gave me antidepressant medication, and massive disclaimer, when I share my story, sometimes it feels like I'm saying don't take antidepressants. For some people, chemical imbalances totally exist when it comes to serotonin. You absolutely should be taking SSRIs. But the stats are in. They say in 2025, there's going to be 1 in 2 people globally walking around anxious or depressed. I think anxiety outstrips depression by about 2/3. So it's like 66 to 33% roughly. Don't quote me on that, but like that's roughly the number. But 1 in 2 is anxious or depressed by 2025. They did some research. Now, I just find it really hard. Maybe, I don't know, call me naive, but I just refuse to believe that 1 in 2 people should be walking around medicated. Like that, I'm just not buying that. You know, definitely there are some people that need medication. I'd find it hard to say 10% of society needs to be medicated, but if you tell me 50% of society needs to be medicated, there's something wrong with society at large, in my humble opinion, if that is the case. And so, yeah, therein lies, you know, a bit of an excavation in terms of what is really going on at the heart of this. And for me, what my lesson, my journey, my story, and, you know, again, back to that, the honesty piece was I wasn't able to honestly express my true authentic self, who I really was. I was suppressing all of that. Yeah. And for me, suppression is a 1-for-1 with depression, right? So as I was suppressing my authentic true self, I was depressing my authentic true self. And that was a big, that was the depression. That was the depression for me. And so my work actually became to uncover the true version of me, the authentic version of me, and actually try and live into that courageously. It's not an easy path, but touch wood, you know, like now I say this, and maybe with everything I've just shared, thanks everybody for listening along. It was a bit of a long share. It sort of starts to make sense when I say, hey, like the podcast and my own coaching business is part of my own mental health strategy. People go, what? And it's like, yeah, but when you're living in alignment to your purpose, you're the healthiest version of you. Right. And so for me, like I can authentically express who I truly am, touchwood, on my podcast, in my coaching practice. Like that's who I was put here to do and be. My mental health's great because I'm expressing who Amrit was here to be, right? Like my soul's purpose is like living into, touchwood, the avatar, the personality that is Amrit. And so that's a big part of my work ultimately, which is, hey, this is your personality. You have a soul. You've got one life that you're aware of in this incarnation. What are the lessons that your soul wanted to learn? What story, what journey is it here to do? How can we line those two things up so you can actually live your fullest, richest life? So that was Dark Night Soul number 1, which is living out of alignment there. And the second one was living out of alignment with my values and my personal values when I went into 7 years of career misalignment. And we can talk more about that as well. But I'm conscious I've been talking for a little while there. So yeah, there's those are the 2 big challenges, and both of them, again, informing me about the importance of personal values.
Woo! Yeah, I mean, it really is a testament to how important the individual needs to self-realize and how important it is to the experiential moment of validation through your journey, not Amrit's journey, not my journey, whoever the seeker is that very evidence. And when you have someone like Amrit that can be so vulnerable and authentic about sharing this it's like a raw nerve. It's like you reveal yourself. There is nothing to hide away but this very moment. And when you're sharing that, profound things start to take place. You know, within Taoism, we call it the bellows. So everything is contracting and expanding at the same time. And when you understand that you are all things and nothing at the same time, you then acquire the Wu Ji, which is the center point, the vesica, between the breath in and the breath out. That's where you get the secret source, the primordial mother. And yeah, it's like that charge we're getting right now, brother. That is when you understand you're right where you need to be, because the feeling outweighs any intellectual distortion, as one of my friends, a Buddhist monk, would say. The dukkha. He's always sitting on guard looking for the dukkha. And I'm just like, all right, brother. He goes, I'm not into that energetic Taoist stuff, bro. I'm into the dukkha, and I just want to be still, brother. I'm like, hey, I like the secret sauce. I like the alchemy. I like the energetic potential of this material. And that's why alchemy within Taoism is kind of like a sexy thing to get into, because there's so much creation. And when you teach someone how to separate electric from magnetic and access what we call the Wu Ji, you get into what Bruce Lee would say, Wu Wei, baby. Flow. So that's a Taoist like realization, is that flow moment. And then it becomes expansive. And of course, your admission, which I think is really beautiful, is, I'm coming from this place of in lack of to be in completion of whole. That's returning to that Wu Ji, the primordial mother, that comes from, you even said it, within my space. I mean, being an ordained Taoist priest in 2 lineages of Taoism, some of the rituals which I cherish, even though it's a dialogue with a monologue, which is the Tao. The dialogue is the communication I have with all my teachers, which I channel Lao Tzu and 171 teachers, and you get that direct source information. So it's like you and I you're feeling your roots. And for me, I've always had my roots within the Eastern cultures, and being in Australia, you get dropped right into it, and you get plenty of that. You'll be in the mints of Indian, Italian, Greek, Lebanese, Middle Eastern, Asian, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, all the melted pot. People really don't understand, like, that oscillating charge that you and I are having right now is like super cool. I got to tell you, because this validates the now, right? And that energetic potential, that polarizing, is what we need as a validator for a seeker to realize that's true.
And it's interesting that you use the book I'm writing is called Meta Flow, and it's about flow, but zooming out a couple of levels, because I think we've done there's a lot, like Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, incredible body of work on flow states. And I think the Flow Research Collective with Stephen Kotler, who I've researched a couple of times, like very Western way of coming to the conversation around flow, which the Eastern roots to it, I'm not even going to say arguably infinitely deeper, I would say. But yeah, the metaflow takes an opportunity for us, just like similar to what I was alluding before with the career misalignment for 7 years, right? When you're living in alignment to your values, right, the things that, like the serendipities, the synchronicities, the things that open up, like you said, like it's a feeling, like it's a felt sense right now that you're doing what you were put here to do, right? And what ends up being shared, what's channeled, whatever comes out, right? Like in that space, you're in the flow state, but it's also your life can be like, instead of just being a state in a moment, which is the building block, when you step out and you look at actually, oh, this is the cathedral that we're building, that also comes from taking a holistic getting larger, bigger than view of kind of going, okay, how do I like orchestrate and build to put together like the character in this story that I'm playing, that is my life, touch wood, to sort of go, cool, this is what it seems like my soul's purpose is, right? And then live that out, and then allow all that flow of soul, like soul currency, life force, whatever you want to call it, to emanate and animate, you and your living. And that's metaphor. And so, yeah, flow is one of my deepest fascinations. It's the name of the next book, which is, yeah.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I mean, when I mention Wu Wei, it's a cultivated state of alchemy.
Yeah.
So when I teach you to separate electric from magnetic, and when you're in the present moment and you witness a physical healing, I mean, I've measured brainwaves for years. Normally, when I'm witnessing that, I'm at around 100 to 400 hertz, which defies the Stephen Hawking scale of consciousness, because juice is juice. I mean, I can see, gangrenous flesh go back to pink in color in 40 minutes. That was my first entree into reality. Bones fusing, gaseous sealing, you name it. I've seen it. I've seen tumors
Mm.
shrink, and you are the now moment. There's no title, place, person, or thing, and that is like sort of like wetting your whistle. Like some of my friends are like remote viewers, and I love dancing the ideogram, sort of like idiomotor expression of divinity through the human flesh. You start to understand that creating this relationship with message that some people would call their spirit, the spirit guides, whatever you want to call it. I talk about the direct source information that I channel from Lao Tzu as my dialogue with what someone would call the Akashic records, which is the monologue that I use to identify information. And then, it's only verifiable when you witness it. I'm an 80s guy, so I'll take the Pepsi challenge with anyone on this stuff. It's about being realized. It's about being able to acquire that resonance and maintain it. That's the biggest thing, where a lot of people tend to get a bite of the spiritual dragon and they chase it for the rest of their life. They get an OBE, an NDE. They heard their grandma. They see a vision. They had a vivid dream. It goes on and on and on. These are all transitory until otherwise noted. You have to master a method that validates your seeking from hope to a belief system to knowing. And that knowing will be materialized in what someone would perceive as, from a physics perspective, my dear friend Tom Campbell, who's an OBE granddaddy, and we've spent quite some time together. He would call it the large consciousness system sharing with you what you need right now. Now, understanding that I've been teaching people internal alchemy for, oh my goodness, I sound old, but 30 years at this point, and it doesn't change. Once you get down to it, there's all this new age way of seeing it. I love the way you've approached your journey, your knowing, because it's so powerful, because you have to start something. There's a million ways up the mountain. And I feel like there's a lot of people that get into this space and they're like, this is the absolute. And I always tell people, it's an absolute, about face, and run in the other direction on that one.
Well, so the key thing about that is, even leaning into Tom's work, right? So the key thing about that is there's meant to be 8.6 billion different ways, right? We are the universe looking in on itself. None of us is superfluous to the grand design of it all. The whole thing is here for it, let's call it it, to look in on itself. It's already got a reference point in San. It's already got a reference point in Amrit. Why would they have, like, there may be similarities. There definitely are. But they wouldn't be identical one for one, because then one of us is superfluous to the grand design of it all. And, that's not the universe's way. Like, everything is unique. Snowflakes, thumbprints, what the fuck? Like, it's all meant to be a unique expression. And so in there, it's like there's meant to be and I think that therein lies one of the biggest challenges at the moment. And like, there's multiple traps on the spiritual path. Like, the ego trap is one of the early ones, and they're not too dissimilar. It's like, hey, like, us and them is another trap. The judgment trap is another trap on the path, which is like, hey, this is my path and this is their path. My path is better than their path, or I have a path. Your path is not even like a path. Poo-poo your path. And it's like, actually, everybody's on their path. Even those, like, you get to a point, touch wood, at some point, where even those that aren't on a path, you're like, oh, and that's their path. Like, it's touch wood. So yeah, it's I think you're speaking to something quite profound in there, which can be a whole meandering that one doesn't have to take off on. That can actually save them a lot of time if they can just say, hey, like, everybody's entitled to their own journey, and I happen to be on mine. And, even in my own work, I've found myself a little bit, at times, having existential crisis. Like, okay, I'll like, just to sort of, again, transparency, touch wood, is like, I'm the purpose guy, right? So it's like helping people find their purpose, living to their purpose, lead their life with purpose, lead others with purpose, working in corporations, like helping them understand purpose and, all that sort of stuff. And at some point I was like, Yeah, but even when people are most off their purpose, let's say I'm putting that in air quotes for those that are tuning into the audio, that's the moment they're actually most being called back into purpose. So that's when they're actually rebounding hardest into purpose. That's actually the call home.
Are
And
you
so,
sure you're not Taoist? I mean, I'll
yeah.
get to that.
But you know what I mean? In that, I totally get where you're coming from. In that moment, I was like, shit, so then actually never off purpose. And then it's like, so what do you do, Amrit? What is it that you actually do? Like, they're never off purpose. You're here to guide purpose and help purpose. And it's like, dude, this is just a farce. and, and then the realization then having to settle in around, actually, this is my purpose, which is I'm just a way marker, right? Or a guide along the road. It's like, hey, you know, purpose is something that's in your field and on your mind and in your way right now. And yeah, we can talk about it and we can help you guide and nurture your way. And the ultimate thing kind of being, you know, instead of having to hit a wall in and around purpose, you can maybe just, you've hit a speed breaker and we can just get you to where you need to get to a little bit further and faster, and just recognizing that, oh, that's what Amrit's put here to do. Touch wood, is facilitate that transition with greater and greater levels of grace and ease and smoothness. And that, you know, I had to reconcile that. But yeah, you know, like I've had my own existential crisis even around the, you know, about my own path, let alone other people's path. You know? Yeah, touch wood.
Well, I feel like that's the biggest. Well, I don't feel like, I know it's the biggest distortion. Is the human condition, and always it's, well, what's my life purpose? Why? And you know, the reality within Taoism is just a polarizing effect of yin and yang, and to find that center point is to align with the primordial mother. Evidence of that will be in the form of manifestation, magic, healing, instantaneously, once you understand how to cultivate. This is why Taoism's been so secretive over the thousands of years. And due to the last 100 and the genocide of the Chinese people under a megalomaniac like Mao, we were wiped out. I've had many lifetimes before this as a Taoist priest, and knowing that reality now, teaching people that alchemy that really gives you evidence-based stuff. I'm naturally, as you refer to the personality, my personality is skeptical. Show me enough talk. Let's walk. Let's get down with the get down. I want to see it.
I want to taste it. Pepsi.
I want to taste it. That energetic potential. This is what we love. I don't think you understand what it's like to be Aussie, mate. You need to play now, mate. Look, when we play football, we're not putting on all those wannabe fancy strolls and caps and helmets. A real rugby player is someone who doesn't have his front teeth. That's what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? It's like there's a level of school of hard knocks that is a environmental thing. It's a historical thing that I think that we've moved through as a country from Australia, that you come to realize your lineage, your history presents itself. And, you know, you have incredible background. What I'm most important driving force for me, and another dear friend of mine, James Tunney, who's a barrister and a scholar and historian and just a seeker who's steeped in ancient Catholicism. Yeah, that's his belief system. There is a level where you're getting this sort of like distraction, as you put it. You know, I think you mentioned programs and things of that nature. There's a need to start to master yourself as a first realized state, rather than be overshadowed. As you said it, within my Taoist path, I would come across someone that might be struggling with perhaps a psychotic episode 30 years ago. I would take them through a mental, emotional, and physical healing, and they'd come out the other side and they'd realize that this was a turbulent event that took place where there are other energetic potential that was sort of presenting itself. Now, today, in those days, back in the day, you'd call that something a little bit more ominous that we won't even mention on this channel, but oppression, depression, possession there's things going on outside of your own consciousness that gives you that misguidance, which I think you alluded to. And it's like, once you harness that power, once you've mastered it, that's why people follow you. It's like you have to master it yourself. And then when they see the insight, they come to you because you send out that resonance, which is a real fancy word these days to just be aligned. I don't know. I mean, I sum it up to this. It's like to wave to matter to particle, realize with your attention, intention, distorting the reality from the cloth of perfection. You are creating energetic potential. The energetic potential has a vibration. The vibration has a frequency. The frequency, if met with that resonance, oh, yes, it will be yours. Oh, yes. And that's, I think any manifesting coach will be like, yeah, man, get that money frequency going on. Get it going on. It's wild. It's wild how this stuff takes place. And I love the fact that you have to experience it. Like personally, I think maybe the re-up, when I witnessed a physical healing 30 years ago when it first happened, I channeled Lao Tzu 2 days after that. And then I was off to the races, like literally on a path, to cultivate and to witness this stuff. And you go, wow, it's like, you can't make this stuff up. Any healing you can think of, I've seen it. And you're like, well, why that? There's 3 people in my lifetime that I've ever seen that does things that are called suitors. A good dear friend of mine, who's a friend of yours, Brent Spirit, right?
Yeah.
He we went over the Kundalini path, and I've only ever come across 3 Kundalini like masters in my lifetime. I've traveled the world. I've taught people. I teach many people. Only 3 that I've ever seen levitate. 2 of them were deep within the jungles of Indonesia, and then the other one is one of my students that I taught how to do that. Now you're like, well, why aren't you doing it? Why don't you start floating? It doesn't excite me. What excites me is mental, emotional, and physical, spiritual healing. That's what gets me all warm and fuzzy inside. And guess, as Tom would say, I'm asking for another scoop. So the LCS is giving me another scoop of the same stuff, and I keep re-upping and going, hey, give me more, and give me more, and give me more. And that's that mirroring effect that people talk about, which would go right back to the bellows, which would go right back to the yin yang, which would go right back to the present moment. Yeah, baby. I'm like, I don't know. Can we just hang out forever? I don't know. Like, we need to have Sunday dinners and just chop it up. I feel my heart is now. I used to have a big family that would sit me down. I'd live next door to this huge Greek family. They just pull me in and go, hey, let's get together with the family dinner. And, this is a cultural thing that you don't see. This is a cultural thing that I think is being decimated today in today's culture. Cell phones, separation, no interaction with other human beings, and they're not getting that deep-rooted culture, that ritual, which, for a plug, by the way, is my Nigong Nidan Ultimate Internal Alchemy book. It's called The Return, The Ritual. In any case, that is the real essence of it. I think that's why I've always gravitated to, huge Greek families, huge Indian families, huge Chinese families, and I've bonded not just across the globe on the Australian side, but around the world. And your parents bringing you to the forefront of Australia, it's like you must have looked into that a little bit, because you're literally like this shining light that's doing all this stuff that would not be, on the general path of what your parents would have considered. How does that work?
It's there's a lot of contemplations in that space. Something as little as even just watching the lives my cousins are living, that are in that environment, because I'm an only child, and so living here in Australia, it was actually like an abnormally small Indian family unit. My mum's one of 9, so that was just the generation before. I know my mum had 1. you know, it's like wet, like wet. So it was, yeah, this sort of triangle unit was in its own way a blessing for me, because that meant that every year they had enough resources to send me back to India every year. So I'd go back to India every year, spend time with my cousins. And as I would just get older and older and older, I just saw, like, you talk about like divergent paths, and it was just so interesting to sort of watch just where they're at in their life and where I'm at. Not that my life is better or theirs is worse, but it's just they're so different. They're so different, and yet we're the same people. Like when I see them, we're the same person. It's like literally my cousins and I, we're like the same. Yeah, it's like, and yet it's like our lives look so different from the outside looking in, and it's just like, and it's all purely the environment that I was raised in. Like I was raised in, and I've had my own set of challenges and set of breakthroughs because of the things that I've had to navigate, and they've had their own set of challenges and their own set of breakthroughs because of what they've had to navigate. And it's really trippy. It's almost like we're not like, I'm not twins with my cousins, but at the same time, it's, you know, when you start look at like, you know, generations, it's like, well, in the grand scheme of generations, like not far off, you know, like these, yeah, you know, where we share very similar roots and heritage. I'm the first generation out of India, in my family's that sort of space. And so it's quite interesting to watch, kind of like, oh, okay, this is what's happened. And so those are some of the like those are some of the more familial, intimate ones, touch wood. Then there's contemplations, which are a bit more terrestrial. And what I mean by that is it's pretty interesting that Australia and India share a tectonic plate. And so even if it might be a different country, there's something to do with the plate kind of going on, you know? So yeah, there's plenty of contemplations that I've had, in so many different dimensions about, yeah, this, the heritage, of India and Australia. And, you know, another one that's probably a low hanging fruit to remark upon is both have very deep spiritual cultures, and both are quite different. You know, so in Australia, you've got the rainbow, you've got the dreaming, yeah, and it's a very different. So the dreaming, like, just to give you an insight onto like how different it can be, is like, the speaking with an Indigenous elder, he's like, so when you look up at the night sky, what do you see? And I'm like, oh man, I see so many beautiful stars. And he will say, yeah, so isn't that interesting? Because you've got a West in mind. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, yeah, because we actually use the white stars to look further into the void, into the blackness. We're seeking into the darkness, and you're looking at you're seeking at the light that's coming through. And it's like, oh, ha, 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 what? You know, like, and it just changed my reference point entirely for the night sky. I was like, oh yeah, I'm like, there's a star there, there's constellation, I'm drawing stuff in the star. And then it's like, no, draw into the void. Like, what is, you know, now we're getting 3D instead of just a 2D analysis of it. And then they've got the waking up every morning and discussing your dreams, because every dream is prophetic, you know. And like Carl Jung would argue, yes, you know, like, and that's recent history, but these guys have been like running, like, wake up every morning, share your dreams, then know what's happening for your tribe, the other tribe, you know, we all collectively saw the same dream. And, you know, it's just like, whoa, like, it's such a different weaving, it's such a different spiritual path to what, yeah, is just, and I dare not say that in the Indian path is a Western path, but even then it's a different path, right? And so then you look across at the spirituality of India, and, you know, of very mistaken as well. Like, you know, people say, oh, Hindus believe in like multiple gods, and how can that be? And actually, they're multiple figureheads. They're multiple energetic states, energetic frequencies for you to connect with relative to where you're at. It's all underneath the thousands of godheads. There's not thousands, but let's just say thousands of godheads. There's like 3 primordial forces, right? Creation, maintenance, destruction, right? And underneath that, it is all one. Yeah. So it does, but it's just access points for you to be able to access the one, right? And so that's completely misunderstood as well. And yeah, but both have such rich tapestries, both cultures, you know. And India is this really remarkable place. You've got like the Baha'i faith has its Lotus Temple, which is like its headquarters for, its faith. And it's mostly a Middle Eastern faith, but its headquarters is in India, right? You've got, the Sikh faith, like the Golden Temple headquarters, in India. You've got Hindu temples galore. You've got Christians, you've got Muslims, you've got so many incredible people, so many incredible mosques, so many incredible churches in India. Like it's just this real spiritual, pardon the pun, but Mecca in so many ways. And so, yeah, two very interesting countries. And then we go back to oscillating around, every place is spiritual if you just slow down for a sec, Amrit. But yeah, these are my sort of ruminations on Australia, on India. Like there's a lot between even just those two countries, let alone all the other different countries that there are in the world as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, you had me at hello. I mean, I'm steeped in the culture, the Chinese culture that dates back biblically, referencing hundreds of thousands of years, but let's just throw a timeline that could be validated of at least 6,000 to 10,000. And, my teacher, Yellow Emperor, is very, very descriptive about how he was called to through the whispers of the universe and magnetized to the earth for 18 days and nights as he downloaded the Chinese culture as we know it. The seed of Taoist alchemy is the very creation of traditional Chinese medicine. And the whole culture itself was derived from his relationship with the universe, and also mentored by another mentor of mine, Jade Emperor. And then, of course, you have the facet of Lao Tzu, and Lao Tzu is a whole nother ballgame when it comes to just a wisdom call of light and language that is so sacred that it resonates and reverberates in your very cell as you listen to that scripture, just like any other scripture. It's that relationship, and you can talk about, well, what does that really mean at a subatomic level? I mean, we can dissect it down to, something a little bit more contemporary, like a Bruce Lipton, epigenetic model that the very sensory self-realized self-receptors on the dermal layer taking in information, creating a pituitary, pineal, and thalamus alchemical realization using the culture medium of the blood to message into the cell, and you become the master keeper creator of all reality, baby. You switch it on and off, and I mean, this is conceptual, because when people listen to Bruce, he's conceptual. I can show you. I want to teach you how to become the maestro of your 50 trillion cells. That's what Taoist alchemy does, is like show you that you are in tune with the now moment, that you are the now. And that comes from that mystical alchemy that is available to everyone. But a lot of people tend to be misdirected because they use a very fundamentally flawed model. And I've worked with many people over the years, referring back to one specifically, John Chang, who was one of the only very few people that were able to cultivate energy and burn things with his hands, which was an interesting one. Now, that doesn't excite me. That burnt his candle out pretty quickly. You kind of dissolve it at a rapid rate when you use your own Jing. But he and I work for the same family, an Indonesian family that was one of the biggest building developers in Asia, basically. And Mr. Damati would be like, "You're just like John." I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm just like, well, you do the healing. And I found Damati through his daughter, who was out here in America. And, I was the equivalent to the spiritual guru doctor that, they don't believe in doctors. If you go to Eastern culture, it's different. You understand this from the roots of your family. You find it within prayer. You find it within the nature of the earth that you can heal yourself through these methods, which were dismissed by someone who was misled like Mao, who, slayed over 60 million of our own citizens through genocide. It was just unreal. But he came to that conclusion. He goes like, let's dismiss Western culture. I mean, Eastern culture. We need to go with the new medicine. And then he ended up finding the last 3 Taoist alchemists that he hadn't executed to heal one of his guys in his upper echelon of the political scene. And so he had cancer, and that was the only thing that was going to solve it, was the energetic potential. So it didn't happen through Western medicine. And what you're doing, which I love so much, is you are finding that seed within the individual, and they're healing from the inside out through your guidance. And once you start to flow by understanding in more depth what it is that I experiencing, you know, these traumas, these events, this is what I considered I had to live with, just like through your own admission. You're like, what? Well, I thought this was years of pain and suffering, and like you're telling me I could be out of here in like a couple of months. That, my friend, is mastery, because people feel like they're stuck in their prison, their mind prison, forever.
And as we're wrapping up, the key thing in there for me, even like you're speaking about, like the ancient wisdom, is like, for me, I for the longest while thought that my message, my message is that your health is your purpose and your purpose is your health. It's just the message in my heart. And it's like, your health is your purpose is your health. And for the longest time, I thought I was just carrying that as, that was Amrit's lot. Makes it sound like it's a challenge to carry. And at times it has been, because I've carried that when I've been out of alignment with my purpose as well. And to then, health is primordial, right? And so, and you're out of alignment, and then you're like, shit, this is not only taking a toll on my physical health, but my mental health as well, and my state and energetic, because I'm like out of alignment, and I believe in alignment and how important, and the importance of alignment, and I'm out of alignment. It's just like it's like a double-edged sword, in so many ways. And then it was shortly thereafter that I realized, okay, like doing further research into Vedic science, Ayurveda, yoga, dharma, and realizing, the whole science of Ayurveda, which is the whole body of, like, you call it Chinese medicine, and many Indians will argue that Chinese medicine has just built on Ayurveda. But anyway, the whole science, there's a whole culture war there. But, the whole science of Ayurveda is here to facilitate your dharma. So it's like, hey, discover your dosha. Like, are you earth, are you wind, water, or are you fire, right? And understand your inner nature so that you can actually live out to the maximum capacity, you talk about energetic potential, the reason you're put here, right? And so that's your purpose. Your dharma is your purpose. Ayurveda is health. Your health is your purpose, and your purpose is your health. And if you're feeling off kilter in your health, check your purpose. It might be the blind spot. Yeah. Check those mirrors. Yeah.
I mean, you bring a great point up. I mean, at the beginning of the year, people were coming to me wanting answers from Lao Tzu about the purpose of this year and moving forward. And he doesn't get into the semantics. He finds human beings quite interesting. But when he starts having a dialogue with you, he made it very simple. They were, well, what's going on? What's happening? Because human beings are so consumed with themselves that they need to understand what is their purpose. And his answer was this: imagine you're like a grain of sand, asking the beach, what are we doing today? Fall back into the beach and be realized. I can't make this shit up. I can't make it up. I mean, I'm like, you make me look at this point. And that's kind of like that insight of understanding the purpose of all things. It's like, why not? You have the present moment. That's it. And whenever I go back to how do you describe watching a physical healing when flesh mutates in front of you? It comes down to, have you bent a spoon before? Now, spoon bending is very similar. I have quite a few friends that are into spoon bending and into remote viewing, and they're really good at it. I mean, they work with the government. They're sort of world-renowned at doing that. But it comes down to the same energetic potential. Once you focus your attention, intention to that center point, everything just melts like butter, and you go through that. But that's exactly the same as human flesh. That's exactly the same as mental, emotional. That's exactly the same as spiritual. It doesn't, there's no variable, but you have to be no place, no person, no thing. And that is where we come to the in my opinion, well, no, it's my opinion. It's my truth. It's not the absolute truth, but when you go into I am, you're making a mistake. It's a double-ended banger that will keep you in a turbulent state of never realizing the present moment. I didn't,
emptying.
Yeah, we'll have to do this more often. I had a great
I'd love to. I'd love to. Love what you're about. Thank you so much.
It's one of those things where I just entered social media about a year ago, and it's interesting. I went from spending my time being the guru for Fortune 500 companies up and down the Silicon Valley. So anyone you can think of, I've worked with them. And it comes from all the way back to the roots of Australia. I've come across, everyone from, you name it, Australian celebrities all the way through to deep within the roots of Hollywood. But that's what happens when people want someone to wave their little Harry Potter wand. You get found. But I went for something else. It was like the second I was escorting one of my clients to New York for 2 days, and they'll give me it was a 7-figure check for 48 hours of my time. I asked myself, what am I doing? And that's where I went into consult with Lao Tzu. I said, hey, what happened? Well, you need to identify where you've lost your path. I need to reach millions of people, not hundreds of thousands. So, and the millions route, it's I'm involved with 2 major telemedicine projects right now where I'm leading up to the longevity and spiritual aspect, because you need to get a handle now, not in a while, or not maybe. And I mean, I think that's what's so masterful about your stuff is you're giving people relief immediately. I want everyone in the audience to understand, the second that you come and find Amrit from this podcast, I want you to check out all his socials, all his offerings, all his coaching. All my disciple students, 126ers, subscribers, I want them to check out everything that Amrit offers, because not only is he an incredible decipherer and extractor of valuable gems from his podcast guests, which you got to listen to some of this stuff. It's crazy. And you make it look so easy. It's kind of like, you might be a little verklempt in the background, but you make it look easy. We'll put it that way. That's the Yiddish word for feeling a little pressure there. You know what I'm saying? But it's important that you find you because that's where they're turning up. They're hearing your message, and then from that hope, you're giving them a structure of a belief, I can believe in something. There's something greater. Kind of similar to how you said when you were involved with the psychologist that said, "Oh no, we got you," and you're like, "What? Excuse me? That just doesn't happen. I mean, I'm supposed to be affected by this for the rest of my natural born life." No, I think that gathering of all that mastery that you've acquired over your lifetime is really making fundamental difference for so many people. And I'm just really grateful to have you in my life, brother.
Oh, San, brother, thank you. Thank you. Your kind words is it's bringing up all my ability to receive stuff. Thank you so much for your lovingly kind reflection, and man, just being able to be here and share with the 126s, and man, it's just such an incredible path that you're on, and just so much respect for what you're up to in the world and how you go about it, not just what you do, but how you do it. Because that's, like we've been discussing, everything. Man, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to, and hopefully have more chats in the future as well. Thank you.
I would love that. And, I have an event center out here. I'm in Las Vegas, baby. So I fly people in normally when I do any sort of like live stuff, which it's much easier to do it virtual. A couple of thousand people, we're good, we're solid. But live, I've only ever had 1,000 people live at one time with group healing. You come in, come one, come all. You come in, anything mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. Let's get down, and by the end of it, it's crazy stuff.
It's fun. Yeah,
natural crazy shit happens. Where, how is that possible? Well, it's all in the resonance, baby. That secret source. And so I have an event center out here, and if you ever get over to America, we could get a guy. I'm doing a lot more collaborations where I have people come out, do workshops, and get them to just blow people's minds. And you're no exception, my dear friend. I need you. I need a little Aussie out here, mate.
You need a little kangaroo mascot. Hopping about. Yeah, I could skip around a little.
At some point, I'm going to use the sphere. The sphere is just down in the strip. I don't know whether you heard of it. Look it up.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I'm going to use that for larger events coming up here.
Beautiful.
So you get a banger experience, because that audio visual experience is like nothing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
Level altogether. But it's all got to do with the sound, right? It all has to do with the sound. It all has to do with that resonance that seeps deep into you at a subatomic level. Let's use your vagus nerve, whatever you want to call it.
In Las Vegas. Your Las Vegas.
In Las Vegas. Well, again, I can't thank you enough, brother, for coming into my life. I can't thank you enough for being able to give us some time here on the podcast. One last question before you go. What's your definition of spiritual consciousness?
The intuitive one is the all that there is. It's the substrate, the membrane on which everything else is sort of dancing and floating off like little sparks of like, dust that we sort of see, like everything that is. And sometimes you look at the rays of light and there's those little dust particles floating through. That is reality. The rest, everything is built upon spiritual consciousness.
Beautiful. I've done hundreds of these podcasts and I've never got the same answer ever. That's really what we're talking about. That's
the tech struggle.
That's what I'm talking about.
Perfect. Awesome, bro. We'll continue to stay in touch. Yeah, please.
Yeah. I would love that. I would love that, brother.
Right.
And, thank you. I want to thank you for spending your time with me today. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble and seafood Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.